Today's episode of What's Going On with Shipping, with Israel and Hamas brokering a ceasefire, does this mean that the Red Sea will be reopening? I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to today's episode. Ceasefire in Gaza? Man, does this mean that the Houthi will finally stop attacking ships? Some that are linked to Israel, vast majority of them are not. Will they stop their piratical attacks and allow the Red Sea to resume back to the way it was pre-October 7th, 2023. We're going to look at that today and discuss. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell to be alerted about new videos as they come out. Here's the latest story over in G-Captain by Mike Scholler. A potential breakthrough between Hamas and Israel set to begin this Sunday could ease maritime tensions, though Houthi rebels in Yemen remain firm on their conditions for ending attacks on commercial vessels. Goes further, maritime stakeholders are closely monitoring the development as the agreement could be a turning point for vessels in the Red Sea region. However, Houthi forces in Yemen have set strict conditions for ceasing their military attacks. A spokesman stated their military actions will only stop when all military options by the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, are stopped. The siege of Gaza is lifted, humanitarian aid is allowed to flow freely, occupied territories in the Gaza Strip are withdrawn, and all military actions by the UK, US, and Israel in Yemen are ended. Lars Barstad, the CEO of Frontlines, put this out in a tweet. We are hopeful with the ceasefire, but my post from June still very much valid. He said back in June, we all want ceasefire between Hamas and Israel, but to expect owners to put their seafarers at risk passing the Red Sea, Gulf of Aden anytime soon is a bit naive. The passage takes time, and any ceasefire will be vulnerable with the risks of crew being caught if it breaks. Well, I agree that the risk for the ships is great, but I think the insurance issues are really paramount in a lot of shipping lines. I appreciate the sentiment toward the crew. Head over to marine traffic. You can see that traffic is flowing through the region. However, that traffic is down about 40%. And in particular, what is down is the high value ships. Ships over $100 million tend not to transit through the area. To show you how stark that is, this is Portwatch put out by the International Monetary Fund. Here you can see Suez Canal transits. Goes all the way back to 2019. A little bit of a dip there from when the Ever Given went ashore in the Suez and blocked the channel. But notice this dip over here. You can see the massive reduction in the number of ships. If you look right here, just choose a day at random. The previous year, the 7-day moving average was about 70 to 80 vessels. And then the numbers going through now are much lower, looking at 23 cargo ships, 13 tankers going through. So a massive reduction. Look at the volume of cargo going through. Same thing. We'll look at that, just that huge drop in the amount of cargo going through. We were looking at 4.4 million tons moving through, down to 1.4 million tons. You can see the same numbers there for the Bab el Mandab. Same thing when you look at the volume going through, you just see that massive reduction because the very high value ships, the biggest ships, are not going through. Head down to South Africa and the Cape of Good Hope, and you see the spike there in the number of ships making the passage around the Cape. And same thing when we look at tonnage. So many people ask, what is this costing? Well, it's costing Egypt $7 billion in lost canal revenue. Massive. You got to think for a second that the entire Egyptian economy is about $100 billion. 10% of that comes from the Suez Canal. So they're only netting they're only netting $3 billion and losing $7 billion as a result of that. A lot of people will ask, wait, why doesn't Egypt go down there and do something? Well, two reasons. One, they recognize the Houthi, and if they go down there and spank the Houthi, then that gives indication that they're supporting Israel in Israel's attack on Gaza. Second, Gaza is on their border. They have a border with Gaza, and they would be concerned that Hamas could turn some of those rockets around and rain them down on the Suez Canal. And you get this story. Container ship transits of the Suez Canal are high for 2024, but big ships avoid the route. Now, you just said that ships are avoiding this region. Well, that's because you have to look at what ships are going through. These charts by Alphaliner give you the indication. If you look at the weekly charts, this goes back to 2023, week 49, all the way up to the end of 2024. What you see is an increase in the number of vessels going through that are less than 4,000 TEU. TEU is a 20-foot equivalent unit. Same thing when you look at the next size, the 4,000 to 7,500, you start seeing a reduction. Where you see the big reduction is here on ships between 7,500 and 18,000 TEU, and then ships greater than 18,000 TEU. These are the big ultra max container ships that go through. You see that drop off a cliff from 24 ships going through in a single week down to 1. And those numbers you see, those few ships going through, are being escorted by elements of the European Union's Operation Atlanta. Most likely those are ships of CMA CGM, the French line. They seem to have an agreement with the Marine Nationale that are doing close escorts of the ships as they go through. If you look at the net numbers and you compare them to 2023 to 2024, you can see what we're seeing is many smaller vessels are going through, feeder type vessels, less than 4,000 TEU, while the big ships are going around. The number I keep bandying about is if your ship's value is over $100 million, you're going to go around Africa. Because if you have to pay a 1% Red Sea war risk insurance is insurance on top of the normal insurance, you're not going to pay that. If you have a vessel that's worth $1 billion, which many of those larger container ships could be worth, you're talking about paying $10 million in war risk insurance. Whereas if you go around Africa, you pay just $1 million in fuel, plus you're not paying the Egyptians $500,000 for a toll. So they are going to use that route. Now, the question is, do they come back? This story from Reuters: Red Sea Roulette, Yemen's Houthis to monitor ceasefire, but ships remain at risk. So the leader of Yemen's Iran-aligned Houthis, Al-Houthi, said on Thursday his group will monitor the implementation of the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas, ending the 15-month war. The Houthis are on an almost weekly basis targeted ships using ballistic missiles and drones in waters near Yemen shores to show their solidarity with the Palestinians. We will continue to monitor developments in Palestine during the 3 days prior to the entry into force of the Gaza agreement. Should also note that during the past month, we have seen no attacks by the Houthi against vessels. Now, that could be because the negotiations were going on. It could also be that both the Israelis and the United States have launched a series of attacks against Yemen. The Israeli attacks in particular have been very severe against the infrastructure of the Houthis. This story by Bloomberg: oil tankers back up near Yemeni port after the Israelis hit the Tugs. So the Israelis are striking at key infrastructure. They're really trying to put a hurt on the Yemen infrastructure or the Houthi. The United States tends to be attacking more retaliatory, almost a kind of a tit-for-tat style of attack where they're targeting where missile launchers were. The Israelis are really going for kind of the throat here. So we haven't seen anything. So does this mean that we're going to see a return back to the Red Sea once the ceasefire is in place? Will shipping lines come back? Well, don't be too sure about that. This story over in Reuters: Maersk and Hapag-Lloyd see no immediate return to the Red Sea. Two of the world's largest shipping firms said on Thursday did not see an immediate return to the Red Sea after the ceasefire. You have to remember, both Maersk and Hapag were the first firms to announce they were pulling out. Also, Maersk and Hapag are initiating a new alliance called the Gemini Cooperation, a very unique hub and spoke method of delivering cargo. They were also very vocal in announcing that they did a study and therefore they are adopting the Cape route versus pushing through the Red Sea. I think you have to be very careful with shipping lines at this point. Shipping lines are experiencing great profits right now. We just saw reports come in about the end of year profits for the shipping companies doing very well because of these diversions. And while they will speak against the Houthis for good reasons, they don't want their ships attacked, they don't want their crews killed, but profitability-wise, the Houthi are good for business. And I think even if the Houthi agree that they're not going to do any attacks and we have a period of lull, maybe 3 months, 6 months, not all the shipping firms are going to jump back in here. Don't forget, we had the Chinese announce that they're going to start building new ships that can exceed the dimensions of the Suez Canal, 27,000 to 32,000 box vessels. The container liners like Maersk and Hapag and all the others see an advantage in sailing around the Cape route. However, there are drawbacks. Again, you have increased fuel consumption, you have carbon emissions issues. So it is going to take probably about 6 months before we see anything resolved should the ceasefire take hold. So don't pop the champagne yet that the Red Sea is wide open, that we're going to see the big ships return back to the area and sail through. Because again, all it takes is the Houthi launching one drone, one missile, one unmanned surface vessel at a large vessel and hitting it to cause the insurance rates to spike again, creating disruptions. Understand, even if tomorrow we end this and ships go back through, it's going to cause 2 months of chaos in the schedules. This is not going to be an easy fix. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? Well, you can hit the super thanks button down below or head on over to Patreon and become a weekly or monthly, a monthly or yearly subscriber. Sorry, I got my time frame wrong. Until our next episode, this is Al, signing off.